Karen Whitfield stood at her kitchen window, clutching her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The community pool looked like a crime scene. Alder green water, floating debris, and what appeared to be a family of ducks that had claimed it as their personal spa. But that wasn't what made her eye twitch. It was the notice on her refrigerator. Annual HOA Board Election, September 15th. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to prove she deserved to remain president of Willow Creek Estates, and her biggest rival, that smug newcomer David Chen, was already campaigning door-to-door with his Fresh Leadership for Fresh Ideas flyers. "Over my dead body," Karen muttered, then immediately regretted the choice of words. Bad karma. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter Melissa. "Mom, please tell me you're not planning something crazy for Labor Day weekend." Karen's lips curved into what her neighbors had learned to fear, her "I have a plan" smile. She typed back, "Who, me? Just a small gathering to show everyone how capable their HOA president really is." The truth was, Karen's idea wasn't small at all. If the community pool was unusable, she'd host the most spectacular backyard party Willow Creek Estates had ever seen. Right in her own backyard, with her own pool. She'd invite the entire neighborhood, show them her organizational skills, her attention to detail, her natural leadership abilities. "Run," she called to her husband, who was hiding in his man cave, probably hoping she'd forget about the honey-do list she'd prepared. "Get out here. We need to talk." Ron appeared, looking like a deer caught in headlights. 25 years of marriage had taught him to recognize that tone. "We're throwing a party," Karen announced. "This Saturday, the whole neighborhood." "Honey, that's 4 days away, don't you think?" 4 days is plenty of time. I've planned corporate events with less notice." Karen was already pacing, her mind racing. "We'll need catering, decorations, entertainment. I'll handle the HOA notification requirements, of course. This will be fully compliant with community regulations." Ron opened his mouth to protest, but Karen was already heading toward her home office, her tablet in hand. She had vendor lists to review, permits to pull, and a neighborhood to impress. By noon, Karen had contacted 6 catering companies, 2 DJ services, and the party rental place downtown. By 2 p.m., she'd sent a formal invitation to all 147 households in Willow Creek Estates, complete with an RSB deadline and dress code suggestions. By 3 p.m., her phone was ringing nonstop. "Karen, this is beautiful, but isn't it a bit last minute?" asked elderly Mrs. Peterson from Maple Lane. "Last minute?" Karen laughed. The sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Mrs. Peterson, some of us are capable of executing excellence under pressure. That's what leadership looks like." But as Karen hung up the phone and looked out at her backyard, all 1,200 square feet of it, she felt the first flutter of panic in her chest. What had she just committed herself to? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was David Chen. "Looking forward to your party, Karen. Hope you thought through all the logistics. Liability insurance, noise permits, parking accommodation for 300+ people." Karen stared at the message, her confidence wavering for exactly 3 seconds before her jaw set with determination. David Chen thought he could intimidate her with details. She'd show him what real planning looked like. She just had to figure out how to fit half the neighborhood in her backyard, without violating any HOA regulations. Regulations she'd helped write. By Thursday morning, Karen's dining room looked like a war room. Color-coded spreadsheets covered every surface. Her laptop displayed 17 open browser tabs, and her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. She'd already had 2 cups of coffee and was contemplating a third when the first disaster struck. "Mrs. Whitfield?" The voice belonged to Jake from Elite Event Catering. "I'm really sorry, but we had a kitchen fire yesterday. We can't do your event." Karen felt her left eye begin its familiar twitch. "What do you mean you can't do my event? We have a signed contract." "I know, ma'am, but our insurance requires." "Put your manager on the phone. Now." 20 minutes, and one near-screaming match later, Karen had managed to secure a partial refund and the recommendation for Tony's food truck brigade. Food trucks at an elegant neighborhood gathering. Karen stared at her vision board, images of pristine white tablecloths and champagne glasses, then crumpled it up. Change of plans, she announced to Ron, who was attempting to drink his coffee in peace. We're going casual, authentic, down to earth. That's actually probably better, Ron ventured. Karen's glare could have melted steel. I didn't ask for your opinion. By Friday afternoon, Karen had discovered that casual was somehow more complicated than elegant. The food truck coordinator informed her that they'd need access to electrical hookups and water sources. The DJ service called to say their usual setup wouldn't work in a residential backyard without proper staging, and the party rental company delivered tables and chairs that were the wrong color, beige instead of the requested champagne. Ma'am, champagne and beige are basically the same thing, the delivery driver explained. Do I look like someone who doesn't know the difference between champagne and beige? Karen's voice had reached a pitch that made the neighbor's dog start howling. But the real crisis came Friday evening, when Mrs. Henderson from the Architectural Review Committee knocked on Karen's door. Karen, dear, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Mrs. Henderson said, though her expression suggested she was rather enjoying it. But someone filed a formal complaint about your party. What kind of complaint? Violation of community regulations regarding large gatherings. Apparently, any event expecting more than 50 people requires approval from the Architectural Review Committee, filed at least 2 weeks in advance. Karen felt the blood drain from her face. She knew those regulations by heart. She'd helped write them after the infamous Johnson barbecue incident of 2019. Who filed the complaint? Mrs. Henderson's smile was apologetic, but her eyes sparkled with gossip-worthy anticipation. I'm not supposed to say, but David Chen was very thorough in his research. After Mrs. Henderson left, Karen sat in her pristine living room, surrounded by party planning chaos, and faced the truth. She was about to throw an illegal HOA party as the sitting AO president. The irony wasn't lost on her, and neither was the potential for complete social annihilation. Her phone rang. Melissa. Mom, I just got off the phone with Dad. He said you're having some kind of party crisis? I am not having a crisis. I am having a temporary setback. Want to talk about it? Karen looked around her house, every surface covered with party supplies, vendor contracts, and increasingly frantic notes to herself. She thought about David Chen, probably sitting in his perfectly organized home office, waiting for her to fail spectacularly. Actually, Karen said slowly, yes, I think I do. For the first time in months, Karen told someone the truth, that she was terrified of losing the election, that being HOA president was the only thing that made her feel important anymore. And that maybe, just maybe, she'd bitten off more than she could chew. So what are you going to do? Melissa asked. Karen looked out her window at the dozens of RSVPs still coming in, at the food trucks scheduled to arrive in 18 hours, at the neighbors who were probably expecting the event of the season. I'm going to throw the best damn illegal HOA party this neighborhood has ever seen. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp September weather that made Karen briefly believe in divine intervention, until she looked outside and saw David Chen setting up what appeared to be a surveillance station on his front porch, complete with a folding chair and a clipboard. That son of a... Karen caught herself. There were neighbors already walking by, probably hoping to catch a preview of the evening's entertainment. By 2 p.m., her backyard had transformed into something that defied categorization. 2 food trucks were parked on her front lawn, after she'd removed a section of decorative fencing. A DJ was testing sound equipment next to her prize-winning rose bushes, and Ron was explaining to increasingly confused rental company workers where to put 47 round tables in a space designed for maybe 15. Mrs. Whitfield called Tony from the taco truck. We're gonna need those electrical hookups soon. Karen looked at the 3 outdoor outlets on her house, then at the 5 vendors who needed power. Math had never been her strongest subject, but even she could see the problem. Ron, we need extension cords. Lots of them. Honey, I don't think the circuit breakers can handle. Then we'll figure it out. Karen snapped, then immediately felt guilty. Ron had been a saint through this entire disaster. I'm sorry. This has to work. The first guests arrived at 5:30, a full 30 minutes before the stated start time. Karen watched from her kitchen window as the Hendersons, the Pattles, and the new family from Oak Street stood uncertainly at the edge of her property, clearly not sure where to go or what to do. "Showtime," Karen muttered, smoothing her perfectly chosen outfit, casual but polished, approachable but authoritative, and stepping outside. "Welcome to our neighborhood celebration," she called out, her voice carrying that special blend of confidence and warmth she perfected for community meetings. "Please come in. Food trucks are firing up, drinks are on the tables by the pool." For the first hour, everything went surprisingly well. The weather held, the taco truck was a hit, and even Mrs. Peterson seemed to be enjoying herself. Karen found herself relaxing, moving through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd been hosting community events for years. Then the first circuit breaker tripped. Half the backyard plunged into darkness just as the DJ was hitting his stride. The crowd went quiet, then nervous laughter rippled through the gathering. Karen felt every eye turn toward her. "Just a small technical difficulty," she announced, her smile so bright it could have powered the sound system. "Ron's on it." But Ron wasn't on it. Ron was standing by the electrical panel looking like he was about to cry. Karen made her way over, maintaining her hostess smile while internally screaming. "We're overloaded," he whispered. "If I reset this breaker, something else is going to trip. Then we'll use generators." Karen hissed back. "Where exactly are we going to get generators at 7 p.m. on a Saturday?" That's when Karen noticed David Chen had left his surveillance post and was walking toward them, his expression unreadable. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, and Karen couldn't tell if he was being genuinely helpful or setting up for a very public "I told you so." "Just fine, thanks," Karen replied through gritted teeth. "You know," David said, glancing around at the darkened backyard, "my house has some outdoor outlets on this side. If you want to run some extension cords over." Karen stared at him. "Why would you help me?" David shrugged. "Because Mrs. Peterson brought her famous potato salad, and if this party fails, we'll never see it again." 20 minutes later, Karen's backyard was powered by a daisy chain of extension cords running from 3 different houses. The music was back, the food trucks were humming, and the neighborhood was eating, dancing, and actually having fun. Karen stood by her pool, watching her neighbors enjoy themselves, and felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. "Not bad for an illegal party," said a voice behind her. She turned to find David Chen holding 2 glasses of wine. "Are you here to arrest me?" she asked, accepting the glass. "Actually, I'm here to concede the election." Karen nearly choked on her wine. "What did you just say?" David gestured toward the party around them, neighbors who rarely spoke to each other sharing tables, kids from different streets playing together in the pool area, elderly residents chatting with young families about everything except HOA regulations. "Look around, Karen. When's the last time you saw the neighborhood like this?" Karen did look around, and what she saw made her throat tight with emotion. Mrs. Peterson was teaching the Chen kids how to play cards. The Johnsons were sharing their famous brownies with people who complained about their dog just last month. Even the mysterious family from the corner house, the ones nobody really knew, were laughing with the Pattles about something. "This is what leadership actually looks like," David continued. "Not following rules perfectly or running meetings efficiently. It's bringing people together." "But the regulations," Karen said weakly. "I violated our own guidelines. You violated the letter of the law to honor the spirit of it. Big difference." Karen felt her carefully constructed armor cracking. "I was so afraid of losing control, of not being needed anymore." "Karen, look at what you accomplished in 4 days. You pulled off a neighborhood miracle with duct tape and determination. That's not someone the community should lose." Before Karen could respond, a commotion erupted near the taco truck. She turned to see smoke billowing from the generator that was powering the sound system. The DJ was frantically unplugging equipment, while Tony from the taco truck ran toward them with a fire extinguisher. "Everyone back!" Karen shouted, immediately shifting into crisis management mode. Run, kill the power to that circuit. David, help me move these tables away from the smoke. For the next 10 minutes, Karen orchestrated damage control like a seasoned emergency manager. She directed traffic flow, coordinated with the DJ to move equipment, and somehow managed to keep the party atmosphere alive while dealing with what could have been a serious safety issue. When the smoke cleared and the immediate crisis was over, Karen found herself standing in front of nearly 200 neighbors who had just watched her handle a genuine emergency with grace, efficiency, and zero panic. "Well," called out Mr. Johnson from the back of the crowd, "that's the kind of president I want handling our community business." The cheer that went up from the gathering was spontaneous and genuine. Karen felt tears spring to her eyes as neighbor after neighbor came up to thank her for the party, for handling the crisis, for bringing everyone together. "You know," Mrs. Henderson said, appearing at Karen's elbow with a sly smile, "I may have to reconsider that complaint I filed. Turns out some rules are worth breaking." "You filed the complaint?" Karen asked, though she was more amused than angry. "David asked me to. Said you needed a real challenge to show what you were made of." Mrs. Henderson winked. He was right. As the evening wound down and neighbors began cleaning up without being asked, Karen found herself sitting by her pool with David, Ron, and a handful of other community members, planning not just future social events, but actual improvements to the neighborhood. "The community pool needs more than just cleaning," David was saying. "We should look into a complete renovation. And maybe some programming," added Mrs. Peterson. "Water aerobics, family swim nights." Karen listened to the conversation flow around her, realizing that somewhere in the chaos of planning this party, she'd stopped being the HOA president who controlled everything and started being the community leader who facilitated everything. "So," David said as the last guests were leaving, "about that election." "Actually," Karen said, surprising herself, "I think we should both run. But this time, let's run together. Co-presidents. You bring the fresh ideas, I'll bring the experience." David extended his hand. "Partners." Karen shook it, then looked around her backyard, littered with the debris of the best neighborhood party in Willow Creek Estates history. "Partners. But next time, we're getting proper permits." As David laughed and headed home, Karen noticed something glinting near the pool filter. She walked over and picked up a small waterlogged envelope with her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message that made her blood run cold. "Enjoyed the party, Karen. Too bad it might be your last. Some secrets have a way of surfacing, just like bodies in pools. A friend." Karen looked around the empty backyard, suddenly feeling very alone despite her evening of triumph. Someone had been watching tonight, and it wasn't just David Chen with his clipboard. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Tomorrow, she'd worry about anonymous threats and cryptic warnings. Tonight, she'd celebrate the fact that she'd finally learned the difference between being in charge and being a leader. But as she locked her doors and turned off the lights, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that her real challenges were just beginning.